Hello again, everybody, and welcome to today's session on Transaction Analyzer. Today we're going to focus primarily on continuous capture. Alright, let's take a look. So to get to continuous capture, we once again start with the Transaction Analyzer user interface, and we start with the File menu. From the File menu, we're going to launch the Capture Manager. And if you watched my first session on on-demand captures, the Getting Started session, this probably looks very familiar to you. So far, the steps we've taken to get into continuous capture are the same as what we took in the on-demand capture session. The one difference you'll notice here is in the on-demand video, we stuck with the on-demand tab. For the continuous capture session, we're going to just click on the continuous capture session. So the user interface still looks very similar to what we're used to. One of the questions you might have is, why would I want to use continuous capture? Continuous capture is nice in that it's a little different than on-demand. Continuous capture would be something we'd want to use if we're chasing down a performance issue, maybe that's difficult to reproduce, it's happening randomly with a user or set of users. Maybe we want to have the ability to go back in time and look at a certain window of time and try to pull out packets to maybe get a better idea of what might be the source of that symptom. So this is kind of like TiVo for your network. We're going to put a capture file on a host, on a remote host, and we're just going to let that run for a period of time. Then when the user calls us and reports that they had experienced the symptom again, we can go back into that running buffer from our continuous capture and pull out the packets that are relevant just to the time frame where that user experienced the symptom. So to do that, we do very similar to what we did in the on-demand session, in that we start with an agent, and to add an agent we can just hit the Add Agent button. I already have my own personal laptop added as an agent, so let's just talk about it. So again, very similar to the on-demand session, we start by adding the IP address of the remote host that we want to run the capture on, in this case the continuous capture. We have our some of our basic fields here that we need to configure. The default here for communication to the remote agent, same again here as on demand, it's 27401. This can be modified if needed during the agent setup on the remote host side, as well as on the agent setup in your local client. Now some of the things that are different here are we've got a rolling buffer size. So this rolling buffer means how much storage on that remote host disk or hard drive can I borrow to roll packets into. So this depends somewhat on how much hard drive space the user has, but secondly and most important is how much time do I hope to capture here. So if this is a power user and they're going through a lot of very thick web pages and transferring files and doing a lot of things that generate a lot of data, 100 megs may not be that much time, because time equals space here in this scenario. So we want to think about what we're trying to chase down, how much data does this user typically generate on a day-to-day basis, and then how much time do we hope to cover. If we want to cover 4 or 5 days, you might want to make this a gig or 2 gigs. But one other factor that will drive the size of that rolling buffer is whether I capture the entire frame or just headers. So again, similar to the on-demand, we've got an option or a field here to specify the size of the frame that we want to capture. So again, if we don't care about the payloads, if we don't need visibility into that payload, then maybe we just want to catch headers only. Now, 100 megabytes of headers only traffic will span a much larger time frame than 100 megs of full frame traffic. Because remember, a full frame can be up to 1500 bytes, and that 100 megs, if you're consuming 1500 byte frames, will begin to fill up much more quickly than if each of your frames is only 100 bytes. So just something to think about when you're setting up your buffer. How much space do I need to translate to an amount of time that I hope to cover? So in this case, we'll leave it at 100 megs. I'm going to catch headers only because maybe I'm not concerned about the payload. Or actually, maybe I am going to catch the entire packet because maybe I'm looking for some web calls here and I want to be able to verify the web page that's being accessed. Or maybe I'm looking for a user's accessing a file share and I want to verify their credentials when they access it. So I'm going to catch the full frame here so that I have visibility into that payload. Data rate, I'm not going to mess with that. I'm just going to let it default there. Now one other option you have here that's a little different than your on-demand user interfaces is continuous capture options. Let's take a look at that. Now what this is this is basically a safety net. So this is saying if I get less than 25 megabytes on the host that I'm capturing, stop the capture. Because I don't want to fill up their entire disk and crash their box because of my capture. So I want to make sure that I always specify enough space in here to allow for all the other processes and things that have to happen in their operating system to continue functioning without interruption. So I'm probably going to make that a lot bigger than 25 megabytes. I might even make that something like 5 gigabytes or something. Just because I don't want to get their hard disk down to 25 megs of hard drive space. That could be problematic. So I'm going to tell it, if I get less than 5 gigs on a box, stop the trace automatically. Even if my buffer's not full, even if I'm only at 50 megs here, or maybe for some reason my buffer goes bigger than 100. That's never happened, but just in case, I'd want to set the safety net. So I'll go ahead and configure that agent. So now I've got a 5 gig safety net. I've got the option to set a filter if I want. I'm not going to do that right now. The last step, once we configure all these other parameters, is to validate that we can access the box. So to do that, in the same way we did in the on-demand session, we click this specify button. And provided I get a list of interfaces in the endpoint, that means I've successfully connected. If I can't connect, that typically means the agent's not running, or maybe there's a firewall somewhere in the middle that's preventing my port 27401 from being passed to that endpoint. So in this scenario, I've got all the configurables set up, so I can go ahead and close that. At this point, I'm going to start a capture. So I don't currently have any captures running. I do have one that I've stopped, and we can take a look at that when we're done, but I want to run live continuous capture right now, so I'm going to do that. So I'm going to name this, and we will just call this continuous demo. The other one I've named CC for continuous capture demo. So this will just be my live one. This will be one that's already, maybe I've run one a couple days ago on this user's box and I didn't want to remove it because there still might be some data on there that I care about, so I don't have to remove it. Once I stop the capture, I can leave that that packet buffer there for later access, or I can delete it. But in this case, I left it there. But I want to run another one. I want to get a fresh capture because we reproduced the symptom in the last trace. Maybe I want to see it again to see if the symptom matches exactly byte for byte on the wire. So I'm going to start that continuous capture. Now, I can do the update status button again just to make sure, and it says I have one currently active capture. But notice I've also got a lot of other devices in my list. I could start a continuous capture from all these devices at the same time and then go and preview any one of them at any given time if I wanted to do that. But in this case, I don't have all those devices on my network. I only have mine. So let's go ahead now and let's see if I can. I'm going to do a little bit of browsing here. I'm going to go to maybe Wireshark. I'm going to go to Riverbed. Just going to try and generate some traffic here. The idea is while this capture is running, what I'm going to do is then I'm going to go back into that buffer while it's live, still running, and show you how we can view the contents of what's happening in that buffer. Let's see. We'll hit a couple sites just to get me a little traffic here. Okay, so we've got a couple websites that we've hit there. So now maybe a user calls me and says, hey, I had the symptom 5 minutes ago. Can you go into my system and look and see if there's any clues as to what might have happened? So what I can do now is I can say download preview. And this download preview is going to ask me, do you want to preview the currently active continuous capture file you have, or do you want to preview the one that you've already stopped, the inactive capture? And in this scenario, I want to preview the live capture. So I select the live capture that I have running, and I say preview. And it'll now ask me, how much time do you want to preview that's in the live capture? And since I just started it, there's not a lot of interest here. It's just going to say for the past 1 minute, but you can also specify a time frame. If I know the exact time frame, I can specify that here. But I want to look at all time because I haven't been capturing for that much time. So let's just take a look at everything. So I'm going to preview that, and when I preview that, I get a list of all the conversations that I've interacted with for the last 1 minute, probably 2 minutes now. We haven't had it running that long, but this is all the machines, all the endpoints that my machine was talking to for the last 1.5 minutes or so. Now maybe I'm interested in only this little spike, so I can use these sliders to kind of isolate in on that time frame, so that now I don't have to download all this unrelevant extraneous traffic. I can download just the selected piece of traffic that I have filter down to. And so I would say download selected. When I do that, it's going to say, what do you want to call it? I'll leave it continuous demo. And I'll say all available bytes. Now I could also, if I'm capturing the full frame here, which I am, maybe I decide at this point that I don't want the whole full frame. So what I can do is I can say pull headers only at this point, and I can specify the first 100 bytes. But I don't want to do that. I want to, or you could just click headers only, and that will also give you just, it'll automatically figure out what the header value is, how much size or how many bytes that header information is, and then just pull down that. So in this case, I want everything. I want all the bytes. So let's go ahead and do that. And now it's going to say, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to open it in Trace Explorer or Transaction Analyzer? Now, Trace Explorer is kind of a pre-filter to Transaction Analyzer. It's kind of a, will show you high-level connections and allow you to filter down so that you're not maybe bringing in so much data. But in this scenario, I don't have that much data. Trace Explorer I typically use if I have files that are maybe 300, 400, 500 megs in size and I don't necessarily need everything that's in the trace file. I'll open the trace first in Trace Explorer, filter out some of the irrelevant traffic, and then create a new trace file just with the relevant traffic, and then open that up in Transaction Analyzer. So in this case, we're just going to go with Transaction Analyzer. So it's going to open the tool, and it's going to import that trace file that was relevant or specific to that time frame that I just narrowed down to. I do not have the SSL keys for this, so I'm going to continue without that. I'm not going to do any of these filters just because I want to take a look at everything that's in the tier pair circle, and then here I can see all my conversations. Once again, maybe I realize, okay, this is the heavier one of all of them. These are probably not enough data being brought back to even translate to a web page, so I'm going to assume this is the guy. I'm going to filter out the other traffic that I don't need, and there I have it. So that's opening a trace from continuous capture, setting up the continuous capture. I'm not going to save this. I'm not going to get too much into the navigation or any analysis of the trace. We did that in the first session. So my goal here again was just to kind of get folks understanding the concept of continuous capture and then being able to configure one as well. Now let's say one other thing I might want to do, maybe I want to look at that inactive capture. One thing I can do is, so I still have that trace running. I haven't stopped that, but I stopped one a while ago. And I want to look at that trace maybe to pull something out of it. So I want to preview the inactive capture. I can do that. So I say, okay, I want to do all the time, and let's take a look. And here I can see I've got a little bit more time because I let this one run for about 5 minutes. So I went to a web page here. I actually did a speed test, so it generated a little bit of bandwidth. Then I waited a little bit, and then I downloaded a file. So in the same way I did the live running capture, I can filter down to an event. Maybe it's this file transfer that I want to investigate. The user was having some trouble and wasn't going as well as they thought, so I can pull down just that file transfer. So very nice filtering capability. Very nice that I'm able now to go back in time. Now this would be something where if you didn't have a passive packet collector in your environment, because that will also give you that ability to go back in time, this does a similar type of function without having to have the hardware installed in your environment, just leveraging the packet capture technology. So different way to have what I call that TiVo for your network. So that sums up continuous capture, and I think that's a good place to stop. Again, I'd like to thank you for your time today, and thanks for choosing Riverbed.